I was born in Ranger, Texas, in the hospital with a doctor, and that was because of Granny. See, grandmother got married and she was 16. And see, her dad had died a few years earlier, and grandmother was the oldest of 4. 3 girls. J.D. was the youngest. And so I know I was born in a hospital and had all this, that, and the other because Granny paid for it. Because when he died, it said well-to-do farmer of the La Casa area community. We were living on 218 South Marston in Ranger. We had no water, no plumbing, no electricity. All we had was natural gas. And we had a natural gas, a little lamp, like a Coleman lamp you'd light, and it burned. And that was our light. And we had an outhouse in the back. And the Saturday, they'd heat up enough water, put it in a wash tub, and everybody'd take a bath in the wash tub for Saturday night, whether you needed it or not, for Sunday morning church. And there was a lady across the street that had a radio, and she would put it out on her front porch, I remember, every day at noon, right at noon, Monday through Friday, WBAP or WFA Dallas. And we'd listen to the Chuck Wagon Gang sing religious songs and things like that and get the news, And down at the end of the street there was a man who was a barber, but he had a barber chair in his house, and the haircuts that we got from the barber were 10 cents. But if we went downtown, there were more. And so once a year or so, we might get a haircut from a barber to get trimmed up right. Money was scarce. When I went to school, Hodges Oak Elementary, no one went with me. No one told me where to go. Well, my mother and dad said, well, this is the school that you're supposed to go to. First day of school, I just showed up. And they figured out I just knew put me in the first grade. And then the next year when I went back to the same classroom. And I was sailing through there, had a different teacher, and they figured out, well, you should be in the second grade instead of the first grade. And I don't remember whether it was that fall, the second grade, or the first grade. When I went to school, I had a biscuit that had sorghum molasses in it, and that was my lunch. I didn't think anything about it. And one day at school, someone, Jerry, would it be all right to look at your lunch? I said, well, sure. And they saw I had a biscuit with sorghum molasses. Next thing I knew, I was eating in the school cafeteria. And that happened to be before Christmas, because I know that Christmas, I guess it was, now it might have been 3rd grade, because Rosalie had been born then. 4th grade, 3rd or 4th grade, I forget which it is now. And because there'd been several of the businesses down on Main Street, which was 2-3 blocks away, had closed, and they opened up one big store there, and they had all these toys. If you were on free lunch, you got to select one toy. And if it was a girl, they got to select one doll, Raggedy Ann type doll made out of, And I remember, we were so excited. I was going to get to select one wooden toy, and Arlen would, and then Rosalie got a little doll that was Raggedy Ann, because I was on free lunch. But grandmother never did ask or you know, she didn't say, well, we don't have anything, can we come down here, you know. She never applied for anything. It was all through the school, I guess. Mama woke me up early and said, would you go to Mrs. Smith or whatever, Scott over here the other way on the way to school and tell her I need her? I said, well, yeah. So I went by and I said, Miss Scott, Mama said she needs you and you know what about. And I went on to school. And she had a son that was also at that same school. When he came, Jerry has a little sister, Jerry has a little sister. I do not. I mean, I objected vehemently. and so, anyway, when I got home, I had a little sister. I never saw my parents or grandparents ever show any sign of affection for one another, ever. Parents, grandparents on both sides, parents. And grandmother said that she did not ever see Mr. and Mrs. Ford show any affection one way or another, any time, ever. Or her grandparents certainly never had shown any sign of affection. And see, Noble had eloped with FL, and they came back to Sweetwater, and she lived with her folks, he lived with his folks for several weeks there. Well, the phone system back in that day was number please, and, well, they took all the little town newspapers, weekly, monthly, whatever, and that's the way they passed time, would be reading those newspapers. Well, one day one of them said, look at it, Noble Ford married F.L. Shaw in Timbuktu on whatever, you know. Well, they came out and they admitted, yeah, they were married. And then when Noble got pregnant, Martha said she never ever heard the word pregnant. Nothing, not a word. And I didn't know anything about pregnancy or anything like that. So it was really hush hush. We don't talk a thing about things like that. I think grandmother, my Martha, tried to. Well, why's all the hush hush? She thought it was exciting. Oh, I remember you could get for a nickel, you could get a quarter pound candy bar, 4 ounces. Whether it was Snickers, Milky Way, any of those, Butterfinger, they all were 4 ounces. Now that's called a king size plus. Oh, shucks. And there was a lot of penny candy, I'll tell you. And if you ever had a penny, well, you could get some candy. Most everybody charged their groceries. You go to a corner grocery store and you'd buy whatever you need, and you'd sign a ticket on it. And then when you got paid, you go in there and pay Mr. Smith back or Mr. Jones or whatever. If you couldn't pay him all of it, you paid whatever you could if you didn't make enough that week. Everybody more or less got paid weekly, you know. And I remember the Texas Centennial Fair was in State in Dallas, State Fairgrounds, 36 Centennial. That's when Texas became independent the first time, 36. And the school, one of the teachers said, sent a note home to my mother, said, Jerry qualifies for a trip to the State Fair in Dallas if you would sign a permission for him to go. It won't cost him a penny. And I remember Mama, she agonized, and Finally, she said, I just can't risk it. I just can't send him off by himself and somebody I don't really know. So I didn't go. I don't know that it really bothered me all that much. I was on the honor roll the 4th grade, 5th grade, and Arlen was on the honor roll for the 1st grade. I forget which one it was. I've got the clipping someplace, a little old clipping that my mother had. One of the last, of course, we couldn't afford the newspaper, but so somebody gave it to her. The honor roll, all A's or whatever it was. I always enjoyed reading, always. Well, there wasn't any radio, wasn't any TV, wasn't any telephone, wasn't any newspapers. So Daddy went to work for Phillips Petroleum, and he's roused about, and oh, that was wonderful to have a job where you got paid once a month or twice a month, you know, but the pay was very, very low, but it was every month. You got it, you learned to live on what you had. And so one summer, I guess it's about the second summer I was there, I went out to the golf course, corner of 8th Street and Dixie, East County Road. They had a golf course at 9 holes, and the greens were of sand. So the caddies would carry the bags, and then when you get on the green, you would smooth out the sand between where you were in the hole so the fella could putt on smoothed out sand. And I got paid 25 cents for each 9 holes. And I worked all summer. And we'd do 9 holes, and the man would get him something to drink, buy me a soda pop, and then we'd do the other 9 holes. Then he'd give me 75 cents, which was a 25-cent tip. And I'd get me a 12-ounce Pepsi or RC Cola. None of this old 6-ounce Coke, that's too little. I got the big drink. Walked home. It was 2 miles to go and get home. And I saved up enough money that summer to buy a bicycle. And that's when I got a paper route for the Daily Bulletin. Subscription price was $0.05 a week. And I delivered 5 evening papers and 1 Sunday morning paper. And the subscription price was $0.05 a week. And you had to collect every week. Well, we don't have it. Can you come back next week? Didn't have a nickel. Well, sometimes they didn't. And I made the first week I made $1.70 or something along that is what I collected. And well, I didn't make that. That's what I collected. And then the newspaper got half of that, and I got half of it. So I got 2.5 cents a customer. Troy Laundry. And I had a panel truck that I drove, and some people would have their clothes washed, and others would have dry cleaning done, and those were ones that had lots of money. And I found out real quick, I had a few stops over on the south side where there's black folks lived, only we didn't call them black folks, and but they were black. Their homes were the neatest, cleanest, in-order house you ever saw. And then I had some of the wealthy ones up on the northwest part of town there. Looked like pig pens. And I really changed my opinion on you can't judge a person by their skin at all. I mean, actually the black folk were much cleaner and they took more care of what they had than the people that had supposedly the money. That was something to see. Odessa, Midland, Big Spring, Colorado City, Sweetwater, Abilene, and San Angelo. That was the football district. And we were rabid football fans. And I would usually find somebody take me to, my parents never ever went to a football game. Never went to a football game or baseball or any kind of sports or any program really in high school. Grandmother had graduated from Sweetwater High in 45. I had graduated from Odessa High in 44. And so I went to Tech with the GI Bill, and whenever I left home to go up to enroll, I took everything I had in one suitcase. And I had to live off the campus the first semester because there had 3 people already in a dorm. There's supposed to be 2 people in each dorm room. They'd gone to 3 already and still were short of housing. So I lived in a house, rented a bedroom with another fellow, and about 4 blocks from the campus. And so First Christian was 1 block from the campus on Broadway, main entrance. So that's where I went to church on Sunday morning, Sunday evening. And grandmother was already there. She was active in the college group. And of course I became active in the college group. And I don't remember whether I met her in the college group or in the choir. We both were in the choir, and then we were both in the college group. And one of her roommates was taller, was sort of like Barbara, only more vivacious and long hair and all this, there and the other. And so and she went First Christian, but she was an only child, spoiled. And so I asked her if she'd like to go to the picture show one night, and waited my turn. And after I said, this is ridiculous when I can go out with a roommate anytime. So I started going with grandmother. And I determined I did not even try to kiss her or anything for at least 6 weeks. She was beginning to wonder what was wrong with her. This was all, I'm just going to hold off. And we'd have a Coke date, which meant one of us would buy a nickel Coke with 2 straws, and we'd share a nickel Coke for a date. And or we'd go to the library for a date. And at the end of the spring term, Martha went back home to Sweetwater, and I went all summer. Well, I went around the clock. I started in January of 46, went all year, and the next year, I was just going constantly, trying to catch up, to get out as soon as possible from schooling. And I know I had 20 hours one time, 21 hours. Anyway, it was at the end of the spring semester in 46, Martha went back home. I was still going to school, and there were still plenty of girls up there, so I started dating a girl who lived there in Lubbock. Her dad was a professor. I forget what department. And so Martha's roommate, your grandmother's roommate, got back to Tech first, and she saw I was dating the other girl. As soon as your grandmother got there, she said, "Would you believe it? Jerry's dating another girl." I said, "Well, a bird in the hand's worth 2 in the bush, Anyway, that fall semester, I dated that other girl, and then after the second semester, I started dating grandmother again, and then we were together from then on. So, that was something in itself. I had been down to Sweetwater. You'd thumb your ride, going to Sweetwater or home to Odessa. I didn't have any money. I had gone down I guess she was off again for the summer, and I had taken off a weekend and went down to Sweetwater, hitchhiked a ride down there, and I was talking to Mrs. Ford, and I said, I said, how long has Martha had her watch? And she said, oh, several years. And I said, well, her birthday's coming up September the 10th, so I thought, I was thinking what I might get her, and so. Anyway, I act like I was going to, give her a watch. Mr. Ford said, well, take that Hudson. Y'all may want to drive around before you come out to the game and check things out. So I did. We went out to the Lake Sweetwater, which is south and east of town. And there's a spot there on one of the holes where it's a shelter in case of rain, this, that, and the other. And we were there, and I asked grandmother if she'd marry me. And of course, she was shocked. Yeah. And I had the ring. Oh, that's beautiful. The odd thing was, her roommate had gotten a ring earlier, and it's a great big old solitaire. Solitaires were these things. Well, this was a main stone with two smaller stones on the side, and then two smaller ones on the side of that. So you had two small ones, a little larger, and then the center stone. And it was a much prettier ring than, what was her name? Her roommate. Well, it doesn't matter right now. Anyway, so we went to the ball game. Grandmother said, yes. We went to the ball game, and of course, grandmother could hardly wait to show her mother the ring. And so she raised up just like that and to her mother's face, and her mother looked down and said, well, that's the same old watch. She said, no, a finger. You pulled a sneaky on me. The campus minister, we called him, Texas Tech for First Christian Disciples of Christ. That's where we got married. And that afternoon, about 1:30 or 2, we headed to Big Spring. And we spent 3 nights in the Settles Hotel for our honeymoon. It was not air conditioned. And the next morning, drove over to Odessa, turned my car, and Dad was off working. And so we got on a bus, Tina Mo bus, and rode to Lubbock. And we had a garage apartment that was a half a block off of the campus on Broadway, and then another half a block over to First Christian. So we was right in the middle, half a block to Tech, half a block to First Christian. 2405 Broadway, that was the address. And we had a garage apartment, and I don't remember what we paid for it, and grandmother went to work. We had no money, we had nothing. She went to work in the registrar's office, that last year, and I graded papers and taught labs. Last year I taught labs in geology and graded papers for. So, I remember one day we really splurged. I went over and bought a pint of ice cream for 19 cents and a pint of strawberries for 19 cents. And we really splurged because we ate the whole thing. When I'd go out on the early days on a well, I'd be gone for at least a week. And grandmother said, she said, between 5 and 6, everybody else's husband came home but hers. She began to wish I was a plumber or electrician or something or other instead of a geologist. And, oh, shucks. See, I had enlisted in high school. to stay out of the Army, which a lot of fellows would quit school and enlist in the Navy. If you were in the Army, a good chance that you weren't going to come home. Not that we were any better than anybody else, but I remember my mom and dad, they were worried about me enlisting. They were so, and I qualified as sharpshooter up at basic training. Why did you qualify for a sharpshooter? One of the expert shooters. And they're going to send you out on the front line. They could see me being shot up. I said, I'm in the Air Corps. Basic training was at Wichita Falls, and that's where you do calisthenics for a solid hour. Then you go on marches, and then you do this, then you do that. And I tell you, and just to show who's in boss, well, it hadn't been long when I was up there, and it was colder than kraut. Oh, it was cold. Wichita Falls, coldest place on earth, I think. All right, the sergeant came into the barracks about 1:30 in the morning, something like that, 1:30. Everybody fall out. Raincoats only, and shoes. Raincoats and shoes. It wasn't raining, and the raincoat was a plastic type of thing. Cold, and what in the world's going on? We figured out the sergeants are trying to show who's boss. We had to walk by the sergeants to sit down. We'd have to show them my penis. Why? Just to show there's boss. And we were freezing to death. You better take that out. I've never told anybody that. We shot the rifles to see how good a shooter we were, standing up, kneeling, laying down, and I was the best standing up, kneeling. When I got to laying down, I had my worst score. And there were a lot of fellows there from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and those guys were getting passes every week to go to Fort Worth, Dallas. William found out when we got to Denver, because they all went to Denver like we did. It provided they passed that test, those tests to be waiting to go into pilot, navigator, or bombardier. Here they were getting passes to go to Fort Worth or Dallas or any place every weekend as brand new recruits, trainees, whatever, and they wouldn't let us out of sight because we were from Texas. I didn't think that was fair. But anyway, so then we went to Wichita, we're going to Denver, Lowry Field, to train as remote control turret mechanic school, 18 weeks. And this is out on the east side of Denver. And I could look up in the morning, here was Pikes Peak, and there was Longs Peak. Both 14,000 footers out closer to the plains, I could see them every morning. You can't do that now, there's so much pollution up there. But I remember that. And I qualified for training, but there wasn't a position open in those flight schools, so I was sent to Denver. And this was when I woke up. We got on a troop train in Wichita Falls in the evening. I woke up, we were in Raton Pass in a train. Mountains. Well, then when I was on orders to go to Europe. I already had my orders to report to Langley Field, Virginia. That was where they were telling me what part of Europe I was to go. And then there were 4,500 of us at Lowry Field in Denver in the same boat. We had qualified, but we hadn't made it into being trained as a pilot or a bombardier or navigator, whatever we qualified for. And so I had my orders to come home, which was final leave. Then they canceled all orders. Everything was on hold. This was after World War II had ended. what are we going to do with these birds? Finally, in October, that was September, or early September, late August, I got the orders. And then I was they canceled all orders. What was going on? We didn't know. There's all kind of rumors floating around, you can imagine. Then late October, they said, well, we found out we cannot send you fellows overseas unless you go as an officer. That's a term. We had all enlisted. We had not been drafted and put in the Air Corps. We had enlisted. And because we had enlisted, we could not be sent overseas unless we went as an officer. Well, there's no reason to send over 4,500 new officers when they're bringing people back. The war had ended in Europe before it did Asia anyway, and they were already bringing people back from Europe. And didn't make much sense to send us over there for a few months, turn right around and bring us back. So they discharged all of us for the convenience of the government. Being a geology, you have a geology field trip camp of 6 weeks between your junior and senior year, and you have to have that to graduate. Well, there were so many fellows taking geology that they only were taking graduating seniors. So 5 of us say, well, we don't want to wait around until after the end of next summer in order to graduate. They'd have 2 summer school sessions, and then of course we didn't know which summer school session we might be in the next year. So 5 of us got approval to go up to the University of Colorado in '48 summer school, and that's where the University of Colorado, I took my geology field camp, and we were up at Ward, up above Ward at about 10,000 foot elevation, and all over those mountains, and so anyway. And I just thank God I'm a geologist, and I love the work I do, because it sure helped me to get through all this. I couldn't stay here all the time. Too many memories, you know. But if I'm working on a project or something downtown, I have to be concentrating on what I'm doing, or it's worthless, you know. So I'm unable to concentrate. And fortunately, God has given me a good memory on wells and geologic things I've done and whatever, and I've met some great people along the way, and I worked with some great friends. And that Superior, I think God played a real role there in my going to work for the Superior Oil Company, because Kyle, you may not, or I may have said something like this, but I was with Superior 30 some odd years before I took early retirement. I worked every area out here. Eastern New Mexico, southeastern New Mexico, a little further northwest. I worked over here, Fisher, Nolan, Cope, up Scurry, Kent, you know, down south. I worked all the way around, and the time they would rotate us periodically. So we got to work every area. I have friends that have spent 30 some odd years with the company that only worked 2 counties. That's all they know is 2 counties. And we had a meeting every Thursday morning back in the days of scouting, when most of my career was with scouting, what it was at Superior. The scouts would come in from scout check, and we'd check the completions, the new locations, seismic crews. Every Thursday, they would come back Wednesday afternoon. And Wednesday afternoon, evening, well, we made sure we checked every well everything in our area, wherever we were assigned that area. And then we had a roll map in our conference room, and it could roll from one area to another. And they'd put the arrows on for wildcats and things, locate those things that important things. And if you stayed awake and paid any attention at all, you knew what was going on in the entire Permian Basin. And I wouldn't take for that, It was wonderful. And there were a lot of things we did that, because we had always had a small staff. And I remember Midland Map Company, they have, about every quarter, they send the title man to the county seat to check any new leases and any sales and, oil and gas deal like that. And we made a deal with Midland Map Company. Whenever the landman, whenever that title man, that's what they called him, Brian, they would, Steve Gandy got into doing this. They'd check the legal documents in the courthouse from the last time. They know that there was volume so-and-so, page so-and-so was where they quit last month or 3 months ago. They'd check everything that happened in that county, and they'd write it on the land map in red. Then the draftsman would transfer that new information over to the base maps from which they made their prints for anybody who wanted to buy a print, And so that was, we'd get those several times a week. They would bring over those maps they had worked on. We knew immediately where lease plays were going on. And hey, Humble's leasing over here, or Magnolia, or whomever. What do we know about that area? And sometimes we get into lease plays just based on somebody else's, all of a sudden started buying leases in the area. The same way on geophysics. Whenever we would participate in a group shoot, that's where a dozen, 2 dozen, however many companies, one of the service companies would propose what we call a group shoot, and they would show, we're going to shoot up northern Midland Basin. We're going to run 100 and some odd miles of seismic. This is going to be the grid we're going to do. And well, I happened to be working in northern Midland Basin when they did one up there, and I went to the boss and I said, okay, they're going to release all the information on this line, 20 miles long east-west, on Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock. And I said, let's make a land check and see what acreage is open along that line. And the boss said, well, what if I said, if we see a rollover, we want to be ready to lease on the line. We want to be ready. If there's acreage available along where they shot it, and there's rollover, which is structure, we want to be able to, he said, well, how do we know it's going the other way? I said, well, we know the other 18 miles it's not doing anything, so you're going to win some and lose some. And if you get in there early, the price is lower. Yeah, it makes sense. we had to be a little smarter, and we did a lot of things like that, Well, the first time I saw it was during World War II, when I was stationed at Lowry Air Force Base in eastern side of Denver. And we were not allowed to hitchhike a ride. Servicemen could not hitchhike a ride. But if we went to the downtown fire station, which is just on Colfax, just west of Broadway, the firemen would, if they saw a vehicle just had one person in it, or maybe they had 2 people in the front seat and they'd hail in, are you going to the mountains? Okay, take these young men. And so I got to see Rocky Mountain National Park in 45. And then I came down, I went to work for the Superior Oil Company the day after July the 5th it was. I went to work for Superior Oil here in Midland. And so a year later, I was eligible for vacation. Well, we didn't have anything. We had rented, paying $100 a month rent for a place to live. I was making $250. So my brother had a car in Odessa. He graduated from Odessa High, same year I graduated from Tech. So he said, well, you can take my car and go on vacation. So, good. It really bothered grandmother. She did not like to borrow a car to go on vacation. I'm going to take you up to Colorado. I took her up to show her around. And of course, Red Rocks, and we went west of Denver, over Berthoud Pass, up to Grand Lake, and over the Trail Ridge Road to Estes Park, and all around, you know. I even took grandmother up the top of Mount Evans, which is the highest road in the nation, 14,265 feet or something like that. And we're not going to the top of that mountain. Well, no, we're going around over there. Of course, I knew where we were going. You got up there and all you could see was sky turning and turning, you know. It's worse than Trail Ridge. All you could see is sky. Well, fortunately, I went up that afternoon. I knew enough to go in the afternoon, because by the time we got up there, which was 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there would be very few people starting up to go to the top that late, you know, because the storms and everything. And that night we came back down and stayed in Denver, and she kept waking up at the foot of the bed. She was trying to avoid getting away from that edge. She'd be at the foot of the bed. I had a lot of laugh. The Tourist and Visitors Bureau of Denver and Colorado is downtown on Colfax, not far from that fire station. And I wrote them, and I got them places you could spend a week up in the mountains, because we were already hooked on the mountains. And so one year we started driving up like Durango, another year up Alamosa, through that area, up through Salida, Leadville, looking for these places that you could stay for a week for a reasonable price. And we came up with a deal west of Denver called Singing River Ranch. It's west of, you go out towards Evergreen, past Evergreen Lake, head on west, and at the foot of Mount Evans there, the road ends, and that's where Singing River Ranch was. And it was the beginning of the Bear Creek that runs down through that area. Well, we stayed there. They had, maybe a dozen cabins or lodge rooms. We stayed there maybe 10 or 12 years. And so that's where Kay and John especially, and maybe Jill. Yeah, Jill might have been there when she was a baby. Well, in '60, Poindexter's was her name. And Mrs. Poindexter was talking to your mother and said, well, we've sold this place and you won't be able to stay here anymore. In fact, we have to move. Sold to some church group. So that's in '60, '61, I got another deal from that Denver Mountain Tourist Convention Bureau. Started looking at additional places. We'd looked at all these places, been up through Gunnison and Taylor Park and on around Tin Cup down through there, looking for a place to stay. And the Y was going to be the last spot we checked out. And so we checked it out in '60, '61, and I forget exactly which one it was. It was either '60 or '61. And because we knew ahead of time that was the last year. And so in '61, we went by to show Mrs. Poindexter Steve. She said, well, I want to see your new baby, you know. And so we went by there. But when we drove into the YMCA of the Rockies on the west side of Estes Park, this looks interesting. You could spend a night there for $7 in those rustic cabins. $7. And if you spent 5 nights, they'd give you 2 nights free. See, this was just when they were starting to try to get families to come and spend a week there. And that was the best way to do it. They had started to build what they called the new 2-bedroom cabin with a fireplace. You could build one of those for $14,000, or you could build a 3-bedroom with a fireplace for $18,000. Huh. Who had 18, who had 14. Anyway, we started going. And none of this fussing about where are we going, when are we going to get there. After the first time we'd been there, the kids were sold. Kay and John and Jill and of course Steve, he grew up there. Well, the more we went, the more the kids loved it, and they knew they had the week free and do whatever they wanted to. And if we wanted to do things together, well, on Tuesday we're going up in the mountains, or we'd look at the schedule, like they still have the schedule for if you want to put your little one in a day school for a first grader or fifth grader or whatever. They had their schedule worked out if you wanted for the whole week. And you could put them in for 2 or 3 days, or 1 day, or none, or all of it, just depending on what you wanted to do. So that's the way we got started to go into Colorado. And so WGN Chicago carried a lot of the Cubs baseball. And grandmother and I got to where we would watch the news, even on Chicago. They had their evening news at 9 p.m., which was perfect for us, so we could go to bed. Didn't have to wait up for the 10 o'clock news if we didn't want to. And a lot of their games would start at 1 p.m., and of course Chicago was the same time zone as Midland, Central Standard. So if it started at 1 p.m., well, whenever I'd leave for work, well, she could watch the Cubs play while she ironed or did whatever she wanted to do. I don't know. I've always been going to Sunday school and church, and Sunday night and Wednesday night. And I've had, what do you mean, still going to Sunday school and church? I said, listen, I don't know how many times I've heard the sermon on a particular passage of Scripture, or I've taught or tried to teach a Sunday school lesson on a particular passage of Scripture. Every time I've learned something different, something new, there's just so much there. And there never was a question. I guess I just sort of grew up in it, but the more you became involved, the more you want to be involved, and then you see what happens when people drift away from the church, and you didn't want that happening to you or your family. And we never told your parents, for instance, or any of the kids, you are going to our church on Sunday morning and Sunday evening, this, that, and the other. It just was a given, And I guess we sort of grew up that way. I don't know any other way to live, really. And grandmother and I started tithing whenever we came to work. I was making $250 a month, $25 a month went to the church, and $100 for rent. So that's half of my paycheck right there. But I never did complain. So we never ever told the children, you have to go to this church or that church or anything. We tried to live our life where they could see that the joy of trying to live the Christian life. We had so many friends, so many good times, and give me a few minutes. Especially when we moved out here 9 years ago, Good Friday, just past Good Friday. And the last,
couple, 3 years out here, we would sit out in the swings and talk about how we'd been blessed. And the closer we got to your mother going home, grandmother, we were just so thankful that we had 4 children that were active in their churches. We never told them where to go. And that last year, the last 6 months, 7, 8 months, and as far as we knew, all of the grandkids were active in a church. You can't be more blessed than that. We don't know what we did right or what we did wrong. We know we made mistakes. Like when that last year at the Y 50th anniversary, I said, we know we were not the perfect parents. We tried to be consistent as parents. Show our kids we loved them. And sometimes we didn't agree with what they did, this choice or that choice or whatever. But I don't know that we ever told anyone, or the child especially, or the grandchild. And we just had so much to be thankful for. And at least once a week, maybe twice, I'll sit down in front of your grandmother's photo there, talk with her, tell her what's going on, what's happened. Then I've been going out to the gravesite every 7th of the month, because she passed away on the 7th of March. And I was real pleased that Jill and Greg, on the 10th of August this year, well, we thought you might want to go out and talk to grandmother. That would have been our 67th wedding anniversary.